Hey everyone, and thanks so much for coming to our session. My name is Christina Sheem. I'm comfortable with any pronouns, and I'm a product manager at Slack. To describe myself, I am a non-binary Chinese American person with short asymmetrical haircut and wearing a dark green hoodie. And I'll kick it over to Prerna.
Thanks, Christina, and thank you all for coming to our session today. My name is Prerna Ramachandra. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a product manager at Slack as well. I am wearing to describe myself, I have long, dark hair. I am an Indian female presenting woman, and I'm wearing the purple Axcon shirt and a jean jacket over that. And we're very excited today to speak to you all about building or rebuilding accessible products from the ground up. And we're going to start by taking you through Slack's accessibility journey over the past year and a half and talk about how we created a culture where accessibility is prioritized from the very beginning of the product development process. So let's start with a quick recap. Slack is a virtual office communication tool, many of you might know, and our mission is to make work life simpler, more pleasant, and more productive. 2020 was a big year of scale for us. As companies shifted to working remotely, they needed an efficient way for their employees to communicate virtually, often across different time zones. But as we scaled in fall 2020, we realized that our accessibility, the product's accessibility had not scaled as the product had scaled. It didn't match that scale, and it resulted in us accruing a significant amount of accessibility debt. We spent a lot of time speaking to teams about the issue. We were getting a lot of feedback from our customers around it. And the first thing we learned was it wasn't because we didn't care. Everybody was aware of the problem. Everyone wanted to do something to fix it. Accessibility aligns directly with our mission and our values as a company. The problem was most of our teams just didn't know how to. Accessibility requires specialized knowledge and expertise, and we just had no process baked in as we had scaled so rapidly to help teams understand and to prioritize this work. So our top priority to start off with was really to get out of this accessibility debt we were in. But we also had this sudden influx of issues being reported from customers because we were scaling so quickly. So it was a lot more than our team could manage themselves. We really needed to ensure we had buy-in from across the organization, we had buy-in from leadership, and that meant having a shared understanding of which issues were critical and how they impacted our users. So what we did was, in partnership with product design and engineering across Slack, we created a framework and an internal set of standards. We called these the Slack Accessibility Standards. It was a simple rating scale that grades features A, B, or C, C being the minimum rating that was required for all of our features. It means that every functionality in the feature, all these workflows, are usable with baseline assistive technology. B was a level higher, that not only are all of these workflows present, but that they're delightful, they're efficient. And so it's really going above and beyond sort of that standard baseline that we set. And A is that, is incentivizing teams to really push the envelope when it comes to accessibility and really changing, it's something that raises the bar for the industry. The standards were mostly based on the WCAG criteria, but we got rid of anything that didn't apply directly to our product. We also updated the language so that it felt a little bit clearer and more legible, provided examples for our employees to understand how it translates onto Slack. These standards were then documented. They were widely shared through presentations to all different teams. They were approved by our leadership. And we collected feedback from all these different avenues, and we used those to update and improve our standards and get to a place where everyone was aligned, that they understood what this meant and that this felt right. And next, I'll pass it to Christina to talk about what all we did with this. Next.
Thanks, Prerna. So now that we had shared understanding, it's time to get to work. And that meant not just prioritizing the issues themselves, but also prioritizing the work in the company as a whole. Next slide, please. So based on the new standards, we whittled down the backlog of initial issues to only about a third of the original set as critical issues. So still not fun, but way more manageable than the full set. We passed on those critical bugs to the individual teams that own them. This was not just because, as Prerna mentioned earlier, the accessibility team didn't have capacity to fully address everything, but it was also an opportunity to help these teams learn how to own accountability for issues like these and build expertise in addressing them again in the future. And leadership really followed through by making burning down all of these issues a top performance metric on team-wide OKRs quarter over quarter. Next slide, please. Here is a screenshot of a Slack message from Slack CTO, Cal Henderson, calling out at the bottom there, continuing to improve the usability of Slack for all users by paying down accessibility debt to reach our own Slack accessibility standards in Q3. So we did this every quarter. It was called out as a top priority until we reached our goal. And we're proud to say that after about a year of this work, we're on track to finish burning down this high priority debt this quarter. So that's how we paid off the accessibility debt. But working on accessibility, as many of you know, is like bailing out a leaky boat. It's not enough just to clear out the backlog. We also have to patch the leaks so that we make sure we don't end up in a bad situation again. And that meant making some changes to how we include accessibility in the development process to begin with. Slide, please. So we introduced a new requirement. Every feature at Slack had to meet that minimum SASC rating, the basic compliance rating, in order to ship. To help teams get there, we asked them to create accessibility design specs to accompany all features well before the implementation phase. And towards the end, we incorporated accessibility testing through a testing partner, Ultra, into quality engineering processes so that we had a real sense of how each feature performed. So Ultra generates for each feature an accessibility health report, which documents the level of SASC compliance for that feature. And any bugs that linger after launch, whether they're new or were just not caught initially, any bugs that bring a feature below that SASC compliance level are treated as high severity and have to be dealt with immediately. So that incentivizes teams to take this really seriously. With all of these changes, the rate of new high priority accessibility bugs being reported has dropped to below 10 a month on average, which is far better than what it used to be. So I'm going to pass it back to Prerna to talk about how this actually looks when working on a new feature.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. So with all of this work that we've put in to really plug the holes and improve our processes, we'll now dive into a real life example of how this new normal played out in practice for us. And I'm going to highlight a feature that we launched last year called Clips. So just to set the stage, Clips are audio and video messages that are available on both mobile and desktop. Essentially, they are ways for our users to communicate with each other asynchronously through audio and video mediums. Here on the slide, we have two screenshots of the feature, one showing the mobile version of it and one showing the desktop version of it. Video clips will display a video preview image and the timestamp with a play button, so your standard video player. And audio clips display an audio player with a play button and the timestamp. Like any other Slack message, users can respond to the clips and communicate through the thread that is attached to the clip. It's just a standard message. And they can also react to them with reaction emojis, just like they can react to any other Slack message. So taking us back to the beginning, the very first step in the design process for this feature involved the feature team asking themselves four basic questions. How can we, and by extension our customers, spend less time on video calls, share ideas, and collaborate with teams across distributed time zones, recreate the serendipity of in-office conversations, and see, hear, and feel connected to one another? We started by really thinking about how can we really transform in some ways the remote work environment that we're in and bring the good parts of in-office communication to this world. And very early on in the design process, as the feature team was thinking about all these questions, Andrew, who is our accessibility designer, embedded with them and worked with them to start thinking about ways in which to make consuming audio and video more accessible. So he was embedded with them from the start, which provided a very unique opportunity for us to actually work with these feature teams and have them see how to think about accessibility from the beginning instead of trying to shoehorn it at the end, which often happens with feature development. So this team, after a lot of the initial research, said, we started with closed captions. We know that captions are an important part of making audio and video experiences accessible. It's not just what everyone needs, it's what everyone expects to have, and rightfully so. So here on the slide, we have GIFs showing how captions work on both desktop and mobile. At the bottom of both the mobile and the desktop players, there's a closed captions button. Giving that a click will turn on closed captions. We'll remember that you turn it on, so you don't have to click on it every single time you watch the video. All of this came out of us looking at the SAS compliance standards and saying the baseline, the bare minimum is we need to make sure captioning exists, and also adding on the ability to ensure that we remember your preferences so that you as a user don't have to think about and keep having to change it every single time. This is great. We're glad we started here. However, we know and understand that captions aren't perfect. Sometimes they can be hard to follow, and it can sometimes be hard to go at your own pace, which is also a key way and a key thing we heard from our users when we were thinking about how to design this more inclusively. So the team decided they also wanted to prioritize getting transcriptions working for the feature before launch. So here we have screenshots where we show the desktop player, and on the right side of the desktop player, there's a button with 3 horizontal lines, which is the transcript button. Giving that a click will open up a separate pane with the transcript for the video. We think transcripts are pretty neat. It's one of those pieces of assistive technology that everyone can make use of. And it's, again, something we heard as we were doing that user research, and we were able to talk to a wider group of people and understand what their needs were. You can use transcripts to consume the video without actually playing it, for the times that you don't have time or don't want to watch something in real time, or you aren't in the right environment to play something. Next, the team wanted to go beyond simply providing this functionality to make it the feature accessible, to creating something that's more holistic and creating more accessible design. So they also prioritized having the option to expand the player and expand these transcripts so that they can be viewed more clearly. So here we have a GIF showing the video player with a couple of expand arrows on the top right of the player. Giving those expand arrows a click will open up the full viewer on desktop. It gives us a larger surface area to watch the videos, and you can also have the transcript up on the right side of the window. This gives us a side-by-side experience. It allows anyone to go at their own pace. You can use the transcripts to find a portion of the video that's interesting to you. You can click on the timestamped blurb in the transcript, and it'll jump you to the playhead to that part of the video. So you can not only go at your own pace, you can move around however you want to. If there's a part of the video you missed or you want to consume again, you can move back and forth. And so this was a big part of us wanting to make and build in as much customizability and flexibility into this feature to give everyone the ability to go at whatever pace works for them and use the feature in a way that works for them. So regardless, if you're playing a video clip or audio clip, whether you're on desktop or you're on mobile, you'll get the same functionality. So here we have 3 screenshots showing an example of the audio clip experience on mobile. The first shows the clip playing on a mobile device. The second shows the same 3 lines that exist on video clips on the right side of the audio clip. So there's consistency in the design over here. Tapping this opens the transcript, and the third screenshot shows the expanded transcript on mobile. I also want to call out that For mobile, we did leverage as much of native patterns and designs for both iOS and Android devices, just again, to prevent that cognitive overload of trying to relearn patterns, but also with things like opening the transcript button and the 3 horizontal lines, we kept that pattern consistent across desktop and mobile. Again, it all works the way it works on desktop. You can read through the clip at your own pace, jump ahead to a specific part of the clip, and just go in a way that works for you. Overall, something I've been talking about again and again is consistency. We believe that this consistency in design and experience is also a really key part of accessibility and inclusive design. We don't want our users to have to context switch across different platforms, across different feature sets of the same larger features, so across video and audio, for example, and feel like you need to relearn how to use a feature again and again. It also ties directly into 2 of our top product principles: don't make me think and be a good host. So we're only scratching the surface here. This is just one aspect of clips that I showed today. Captions and transcripts are 2 big ticket items that we wanted to spotlight, but there's so much more that the team considered, from how transcripts in various players allow you to multitask, thinking about how this would work for users who are neurodivergent and having to think about different things, to screen reader announcements, which is really, really important. And again, baseline minimum SASC. One of the areas the team really thought about was how to minimize announcements bleeding into the recording experience, so you don't have like a mishmash audio and it's hard to follow. And we also really wanted to make this intuitive to use on a keyboard to navigate through all of these different pieces of UI that were new to Slack in some ways. Throughout this process, our designer, Andrew, who I had mentioned before, his expertise in accessibility, has been working in the space for a while. He embedded with the team building the feature and was really able to inform and influence the design process. So accessibility and inclusive design was prioritized from the very beginning. Accessibility specs were part of the mocks, and user research and testing through our partner Fable all included users with disabilities, so that the team understood what it meant to use this product using assistive technologies, and also got a wide, diverse group of users with different abilities, and they were able to understand what their needs were. I also want to call out that engineers from the accessibility infrastructure team also helped engineers on the feature team understand how to implement features to ensure that they were accessible. So they all worked closely together and they collaborated with them. And while clips were a pretty prominent large feature that we released last year, the process provided us with a model for how centralized accessibility teams can work with feature teams and empower them to ensure their features are accessible. So all the upfront work we put in as the feature was kicking off means that today, as the feature team releases updates and improvements, they always think about and prioritize for accessibility, since that culture is now part of their DNA and it's embedded into the team and how they're thinking. We know that we still have a long way to go, but we are very excited to continue building on these efforts, not just to meet the minimum bar we've set for ourselves, but really exceed it. And I'm going to hand it back to Christina to talk about what we're doing next.
Thanks, Prerna. So yeah, that's where we are now. We're in a much better place, and we're really proud of the progress that we've made. But as Prerna just said, there's a lot more we can keep doing to keep advancing the state of accessibility at Slack. The first thing is we have to protect the wins. And we're doing that by setting up regular testing, both automated and with real users, to catch regressions early. Slack is a really big product with a lot of people working on it, and things slip past our fingers, but we're doing what we can to make sure we catch those early and try to find those new leaks and patch them up. We're also investing in core accessibility infrastructure and in our internal design system to make it more effortless for everyone to develop accessibly, even if they don't have deep expertise in the area. Taking that a step further, we're also polishing our efforts. As Prerna mentioned, SASC is just the lowest rung on the ladder. We want to get to that SASC A level where we can. So we need to get beyond just fixing compliance bugs to looking at the usability of Slack overall for users who need assistive technologies and other accommodations. That means addressing usability feedback, building nice to haves, and really just trying to go above and beyond wherever we can. To help us do that, we're developing programs to get user feedback even earlier in the development process for major features like the clips and things like that. We're also continuing to find ways to weave accessibility into the rest of the organization so that it shows up in all the places you would expect it to, everything from incident reporting to thinking about it in the context of help documentation and also third-party apps. Finally, convincing people that accessibility is important isn't enough. We also have to give them the vocabulary and the skills to actually do the work and to know when they need to ask for help. So we have invested a lot of efforts into education. We're doing this by creating role-specific training around accessibility for designers, for engineers, for product owners, and making them a standard part of new employee onboarding. We're including users with disabilities in exploratory and usability research so that we have these key empathy building moments early on in the process when we're designing. And finally, we're trying to keep it fun too by designing fun activities around accessibility in team offsites, everything from customer fireside chats to empathy building exercises to learning how to do sign language. Next slide, please. So all of this work is ongoing. Today we shared the highlights, but the work can be imperfect and frustrating. We don't win everything we want on the first try. We can't die on every important hill, but despite that, we're really putting in the work to change the culture and the practices at Slack to bring accessibility closer and closer to the center. Thank you for listening to us today, and please let us know if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Prerna and Christina, for a great session there. A reminder, you can add any questions that you have to the Q&A portion of chat. We do have quite a few coming in, so I can get started. You can also upvote those questions. That will help us prioritize internally. Okay. First question here. What can be done to help designers design in an inclusive manner and provide annotations without doing the work for them? How do we begin shifting the culture?
I can kick it off and let Christina add her 2 cents as well. This is the clips example for us was really powerful just because it was our first time thinking about how to incorporate inclusive design practices and helping designers think inclusively as well. It's an ongoing process, and I will admit that we are not perfect at it at all. The first thing I will say that has really made a difference is partnering with someone who is an expert and partnering with someone who is able to work with you to talk to users who have disabilities and talk to users across the ability spectrum. And so our user research partner is an organization called Fable. They do amazing work. And the biggest thing I've noticed with helping designers think about designing inclusively is to actually have them talk to users. Accessibility isn't something that you can read a paper or look at some data and think that the best way to learn and to build empathy and figure out how to make something work right is by having those conversations and making sure you talk to a wide group of users. So I would say definitely work with the design, have your design team work with someone who can give you access to users to be able to have those conversations. And then also do that, not just in the context of building a single feature, but do that as an ongoing regular basis. So Christina alluded to all of the trainings that we've been doing, empathy building exercises that we've been doing. We have had several of them with the design team at Slack, and we've heard again and again how powerful those are, whether those are customer fireside chats or just exercises teaching designers on how to use a screen reader, which I want to call out is never going to be perfectly indicative of someone's lived experience, but even just understanding how the technology works makes a big difference to designers thinking about how to design for it. So it's a holistic thing, and but I would say number one, talk to customers, and talk to customers.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is that Andrew Gosin, the designer Prerna mentioned earlier, he put together an amazing training for the rest of all of the designers at Slack. And in that training, one of the things that I found most powerful was that he actually walks through how he builds an accessibility spec. So, it may be the sort of thing where you have to kind of do it with the team or be a little bit more hand-holding the first couple of times. But I think once people understand the importance of it, once people understand the point of doing it, then really helping them take it to the next level and breaking that down and saying, hey, you can do this too, just by thinking about X, Y, and then Z in this sequence. And of course, people aren't going to do it, perfectly on the first try, but I think giving people a template for how to get started doing that spec building and providing them feedback along the way, they'll get there eventually.
Great. Thank you both. Okay. What are some of the most effective activities that you did to teach people about accessibility and generate the sense of empathy and urgency to design with accessibility?
I can speak to that. We just did a session, or I guess a remote on-site with the product and design teams, and we had two activities that I think went over very well. One was a fireside chat. And the nice thing about this was that, it was very low stakes entry. All you have to do is go there and listen. And basically, I moderated a panel with several users with disabilities talking about their actual lived experiences using Slack. And I think just hearing people's experiences is really powerful. Hearing, the workarounds people do to get around things that a designer or a product manager may have otherwise thought of as like a very minor accessibility issue that they can brush over. Hearing how that actually impacts people really changes their perspective on that. The other thing we did to go along with it was to run an interactive session where we basically, as Prerna said, not trying to say this is exactly what it's like to be disabled, but to just teach people, set out some challenges for people. Can you get from point A to point B using just the keyboard? Can you get from point A to point B and do this workflow that you probably as a Slack employee do 10,000 times a day? Can you do that using just the screen reader with your screen off? And it was really powerful, I think, for the people who participated in that to see, oh, this actually works completely differently than my mental model of how Slack works as a sighted user who uses a mouse. And they really, I think, understood the reason why we can perseverate on things that before they may have thought of as unimportant.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christina. Okay, a lot of great questions. Thank you all so much. Okay. Do you have any suggestions to the design team on setting up their own accessibility standards and implementing those standards?
Yeah, I can speak to this. So I would say that it's always helpful to start with an existing set of standards. And so for us, it was really helpful to start with WCAG and just really understand and go through what parts of those standards are going to be applicable directly to your product. So start from there and like break it down from there. And I think the second thing is to, this is something we did as well, translate the WCAG standards into language that's a little bit more easily understood to someone who does not understand accessibility, or actually who doesn't even understand like a lot of technical terms, because we don't know who's going to be consuming this content like internally. And so like we have sales and marketing people who want to look at our accessibility standards to be able to speak to customers about it. So start with an existing set of standards. It's always a good baseline. Understand those standards, figure out what parts of those would apply to your product, and then try to translate those into more like legible, more understandable terms. Once you're sort of in that, gone through that process, this is, I think, something that's really key when it comes to accessibility in an organization of any size and setting standards and frameworks. You have to get leadership buy-in, because accessibility is not going to be impactful if a single team does it really well, because there's going to be other parts of the product that don't work as well, and it's still going to impact the overall user experience. So it's really critical to make sure you have allies within leadership who are not only able to help you take those standards and standardize them across the board, but then we're able to give teams the ability and the empowerment to do whatever work is necessary to meet those standards. And so I just want to call out the Clips example. And another feature we released around the same time were Huddles, which are essentially audio calls, group audio calls on Slack. There was a mandate for the team from leadership that we will not launch this if it's not accessible. If it doesn't hit at least SASC, we cannot launch this. And I think having that was really, really powerful. So I would say, like, as you're doing all of this work on figuring out what those standards are, find allies within leadership, especially product and design leadership, who can be advocates for you and who will help make sure that the rest of the organization is empowered to actually work with those standards and make the product more accessible. So those things I think are really key.
Great, thank you, Prerna. And there is a follow-up question here on SASC. Does SASC minimum mean WCAG 2.1? Is that the standard that you're
We are trying to get to WCAG 2.1 AA. I think I don't know if we're actually there yet fully, but that's been the goal with SASC.
Got it. Awesome. And another one here on SAS. Can you elaborate on steps you took to co-create SAS across teams? Who drove the conversation, and were there any important tiebreakers with the levels?
Yeah, so we worked very closely with people within design, product, and engineering. So as Andrew, who we've talked about a lot, who's absolutely awesome, was a pretty close partner in this process. And we also have a great engineer on the team. His name is Todd. He's an expert in accessibility. Both of them were key partners for me as I started designing SAS. And then I also had a lot of support from leadership on it. And so the way we actually operated was exactly what I'd said before, which is looked at WCAG, took a lot of time to understand what each of those guidelines meant. This is where engineering is really helpful as well, because you need to actually sit with them and understand what it means technically. So once we felt like we had a good enough draft of it, the other thing I did alongside was actually have a lot of conversations with different teams within the organization. So teams that we knew were working on features that had a lot of accessibility, bugs filed against them, teams who had come to us and said, we really care about this, I don't know where to start. So actually, my first few weeks on working on this project was really just a listening tour as I was developing these standards to be like, what is it that you find difficult to understand about accessibility? What is it that you find hard, to prioritize? And so taking that information, taking that feedback was really helpful, because that's when we get to a place where we're like, we need to translate WCAG guidelines to something that's more quote unquote understandable to our employees on our teams. And so those were the two things: understanding what teams needed, translating and creating a draft of these standards. And then we actually spent a lot of time workshopping that with leadership. Like, we had executive reviews where we were able to walk them through what these standards were and what it meant. Quality engineering, quality is a key partner in all of this, because they're the ones who are ultimately going to be testing all of these features and making sure they hit the standards that we've set. And so we needed to make sure QE understood what these standards meant. And then we also had to make sure that we had the right checkpoints where these standards were applied. And the biggest one to start off with was we have a meeting where we essentially every feature, or most of our features, go through where they essentially, it's a checklist of, is this security ready? Is this like marketing ready to launch? There was never an accessibility step in there, and now there is. So we included the accessibility report, the health report, that outlines the SAS compliance of this feature in that review. And if that's not part of the review, if that's not been filled or there are issues, the feature doesn't get the green light to launch. So we looked at those checkpoints where this needs to be applied. And that's, again, where having leadership backing was really helpful, because no one wants to create a quote unquote bottleneck. But we had to make sure people understood this was really critical. Like, it's worth creating that bottleneck if that's what happens. So those were like the key steps we went through. And then in terms of like tiebreakers, I think, I keep coming back to the Clips example. Like, that was because people had questions about what is a SAS B feature versus what's a SAS C feature, and how do we make that differentiation, especially once you start getting to some of some of like the more nuanced details. And when I think about something like transcriptions versus caption, like that was something that I know there were a lot of discussions about with the team. They're like, is it enough if we just have captions? Like, do we need a transcription service? Is that really SaaS-C? And I think that's where the user interviews are really powerful. The one thing I want to acknowledge is you can, again, have all the checklists in the world, but it's never going to match someone's lived experience. And so a lot of times you can say like, theoretically, this feels like this is like not critical. And then you talk to a user and you realize, oh no, that's actually really critical, even if it doesn't match the standard. And so transcription services are a great example of what we're like, if we just looked at it in theory, maybe it's not critical, but once you start talking to users and understanding how they would use your feature, that was when the team realized, no, this is something that's really critical and we should make sure it's there for launch. So that's how we deal with some of these tiebreakers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Prerna. Still have quite a few questions here to go through, so I'll dive into the next one. Okay, that statement earlier from your leadership is so powerful. Any tips or lessons learned in engaging with leadership? Go directly to the top right away.
I'd love to hear Christina's thoughts on this as well, because she's had experience working on accessibility in 2 different organizations now. But I would say that I started with just going to my direct manager at the time, who had worked on accessibility before and understood the importance of it. So having him as a key ally was really helpful because he was able to talk to the right people in leadership and give me the forum to be able to express what's important. I think that always, I think it depends on organization to organization and how comfortable you are going up the chain of command. So it's definitely going to vary depending on the size of your organization and the culture and the processes there. Always starting with your direct manager is usually a good bet. I would also like to call out that design and product leadership today tends to be much more sensitive, from what I can tell, about accessibility than they were even like 5 years ago, or even 2 years ago for that matter. And the reason I think part of why it's become so critical is we're living in a time now where people don't have the option of not using technology. Like even organizations that were never tech savvy, never encouraged working remotely, were forced to adapt. And if we're living in a world where all of your employees have to use this product to work remotely, and that product doesn't work for some of your employees and they can't literally be productive and can't work, like that is a business issue as well. And I'm always wary of bringing the compliance hammer and the business hammer in the very beginning, because that's usually not how you make friends. And I think making friends within the organization is very important. But if you are getting a lot of pushback, I would also say like partners in sales, marketing, and legal can be really, really valuable in helping you make the case, because there's legal implications for you not being compliant, and there's sales implications. Like we've seen big customers, big organizations asking specifically about accessibility, not just because they have internal employee resource groups that are very vocal about this today, but because it is purely, in a capitalistic way, a business reason. If your employees can't be productive, then it's costing you money. And so you have to make sure that your vendors and your tech vendors are accessible. And so that's always, if you're getting a lot of pushback from leadership, that's always like a good angle, an effective angle to bring in. I wouldn't bring it in the very beginning. I would start with your direct manager, your peers, like people the allies you already have in the organization, and try to move up from there. But this is always a pretty powerful, I think, tool you can use. Let Christina speak to things too.
That was a great answer. I barely have anything to add, but I think that the way that I think about it is that unfortunately, as Prerna said, oftentimes the thing that's going to tip organizations over the edge is those complaints from customers, is issues being filed, deals getting blocked, right? Like things that we wish were not the main impetus for getting this accessibility work done, but they often are. And so what you can kind of do to prepare if that hasn't happened yet is to try to create as much opportunity for amplifying those when they do come in, and like kind of a pathway for directing that energy when it inevitably happens. So being able to say, and I think both Slack and the organization that I worked in previously, there were already efforts around making sure accessibility was a thing. It maybe just wasn't the same level of priority that it is now. And by having that in place, when those complaints started coming in, when those requests started coming in, leadership, instead of being like, oh my God, I have no idea how to deal with this, we're like, oh, there's a team over here that's already working on it. It's easy for us to just throw more resources at them or move things out of their way or whatever it is to amplify their efforts. So even if it feels super frustrating to not have that buy-in right now, I would say just keep doing what you're doing. As Prerna said, like build those alliances across the org, especially cross-functionally. And like one day there will be something that tips you over the edge and you'll be ready.
Great, thank you both. Okay, this one is about working with users with disabilities. Okay, when incorporating users with disabilities in design, are these external consultants, internal employees, both?
A mix of both. So we do want to be very mindful of one thing, which is we don't want to take someone's time and effort without a lot of times without compensating for them. This is not a substitute for testing or QE or quality engineering. So one of the reasons why we really enjoy working with Fable is it is an external organization that is able to recruit participants for these kinds of user research studies. As I'm pretty sure that, I mean, they're compensated for it, and they're also able to give us the best practices to be able to do this research correctly. Like even for designers who are using Fable for the first time, who've never talked to, done user research around accessibility, it's like making sure that they have the right language to be able to like conduct these studies. Like Fable has been really great partner with helping with that. So that's kind of like our primary user research resource. We do have an internal employee resource group, and we do post requests there when it comes to new features to do accessibility testing and research. So people are always willing to test new features. We do have the option of releasing internally first so that it can sort of be internally used and we can get feedback before it goes out to customers. And so we do get feedback from our users with disabilities who are in Slack, like other employees. So that's also a pretty helpful resource as well. And then we also do talk to our users, our customers directly. So with some of the large organizations that have employee resource groups, we have a pretty open communication channel with all of them, and we know who the vocal employees are, so we'll always reach out to them as new features are being developed and ask if they want to talk to us about them, if they want early access to them, if they want to test them earlier. So that is also a really, really helpful channel. I would say that those are all additive though. It's always best to start with an organization or a partner that has a lot of experience in this, just to make sure, again, you're not substituting this kind of testing. You're not substituting it in a way that you're not using them as a resource to just test your feature without sort of compensating them for their time.
Great. Thank you, Prerna. Okay. When it comes to auditing the product for accessibility issues, do you do it manually or is it automated?
It is manual. So we have automated checks in place for some basic things, but the vast majority of the biggest issues that you're going to come across in terms of accessibility that are truly blocking for people can't be detected in an automated way, especially for an app like Slack. If it's a static website, I think it's a very different story, but with something like Slack, where there are so many different workflows you could end up in, so many different situations, there just unfortunately isn't any way around it other than doing manual testing. But as Prerna mentioned, we do have testing partners. So it's a QE organization. When I've worked on smaller teams, that testing can be done by the team itself, but it's really difficult to scale that up to a product as large as Slack.
Right. Okay, I heard that you've developed a set of translated WCAG guidelines that are easier for devs to understand. Is this something that is publicly available?
This is not publicly available. I wouldn't say that they're necessarily translated WCAG standards like overall. It's just like the parts of WCAG that we think are relevant to the workflows in Slack, that are easier for devs and designers to understand, and using language and terminology that is very much relevant to our product, and using language and terminology that is about our product. So we have internal names for things, for workflows, for features, and with the Slack accessibility standards, we've been able to use kind of like those internal names. So I wouldn't say it's like translating all of WCAG to make them easier to understand.
Right. Got it. Thank you. Okay, what KPIs do you use around accessibility at Slack?
Christina, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so one that we touched on in this presentation has been the number of SASE bugs both coming in and also how many of them are still remaining. I think that's a really important one. Beyond that, I think we've tried to shy away from at least using metrics-based ways to measure the success of accessibility. I think there were some other talks, maybe even earlier today, about this, but basically we don't want to get into a situation where we say, the reason why we care about accessibility or the way that we care about it is how many people use these features, because that's just never going to be the way that pushes it forward. So for me, I think I consider sort of more qualitative measures, which are tough to build KPIs around. But I think that thinking about the number, with the baseline of like SASE bugs coming in, SASE bugs that we're letting out, right? Also, and then just considering the quality of people's experiences based on qualitative user research. Those are the things that kind of I orient around.
Yeah, I think it was Garrett Ford's talk maybe earlier that was around measuring, which I think was really, really powerful. The only other thing I would add to that is I also think that quantitative data is probably a lot of times misleading when it comes to accessibility because it's so nuanced. And I think that when you look at accessibility with a very narrow understanding of this is only benefiting a user with a disability, you miss the power that comes with thinking inclusively. So I think that the one example I'd use is captioning or transcription services. Like you think that it's only used by somebody who cannot hear. But a lot of times, like you might be in a situation where like you can't turn on the volume, either because, I don't know, you're in the quiet car of a train and your AirPods died. And so you have to all you can do is rely on captions or transcription services. And so I think that if we start collecting like quantitative data around like things like this, we can miss circumstances under which people would be using something and how it could benefit them. So qualitative research is probably one of the best ways in which you can gauge the impact of your feature and also understand how someone's using something and be able to inform future designs.
Great, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question here. All right. How did you compile that list of tech debt to prioritize? Did you have an external audit help you, or did engineering have a running list for you? Can you speak to that?
A lot of work. So prepared to take a lot of time going through Jira. The one advantage we had was our customer experience agents are absolutely incredible, and they had already been tagging anything that was coming in for accessibility with the right labels. And so it was just a matter of sort of going into Jira, filtering by those labels. And then where the time was really spent was, one, figuring out which of these issues were still relevant, because some of these issues were filed like, a year or 2 years ago, and the product has changed and evolved since then. So is this even still relevant? Or if it is, then the actual bug is different than what it used to be because the feature changed. So that's where we spent a lot of time on, was once we had that from Jira, we were just spending a lot of time with CE, with our engineers, figuring out what was relevant and what's not. And then we used the SAS framework to prioritize what's the most important thing from that backlog.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then with that, I think we're at time. I want to thank Prerna and Christina for such a great session. We appreciate it. Thank you all for joining this session. We have a couple more left today, so hope you can catch those. And thank you all for being here at AXCon. Have a good day. Bye.